All right, and we're rolling. Hello, this is the Genesee County Compassion Club show. I'm your host. My name is Jeremy. I'm coming to you live from allpointstv.com. How's everybody doing today? Woo!
Nice.
John?
It's nice to get the rain stopped. It's nice to see that.
For a brief period, it's ended.
Oh, yeah. Because I remember when I was camping as a kid, we used to camp, and it rained for 2.5 solid weeks. We were up in Traverse City. Every day it rained.
Until you packed up to come home, and then it...
No, actually, it rained beyond that, I guess. It had to be a record. I'm serious, yeah.
Well, we certainly have had some gorgeous weather, but it's over now, so it's kind of cold, getting cooler every day. I know we had our first snow in Michigan. Yes. Just yesterday, right up there in Waters Meet, Jerry. Yeah. Getting ready for sled season. But no, I mean, you guys, I love the 4 seasons. Michigan is a beautiful state, and we're blessed to have the weather that we do, even if you don't like it. So, but hey, today's the 25th. This month's almost over. It's going to be gone before you know it. We got some events coming up at the G3C. I want to remind you guys about. We have the Soup Kitchen this Friday. Please show up if you can. It's this afternoon, or not this afternoon, but Friday afternoon. And any volunteers that can show up, we really appreciate it. Definitely could use your help this week. That is this Friday. So if you guys could slot your afternoon time, you will get fed. It's a good experience, and we could definitely use you there. You can meet at the club 2-3 o'clock, and then head on over to the Soup Kitchen on Seward Avenue. Or just meet us right at the Soup Kitchen. Either way is fine. So we'd love to see you there. Love to have you help us out if you can. That'd be great. Next event coming up, I want to make sure I mentioned, is next Tuesday. It's Halloween, the 31st. So get down to the G3C. We got a special event coming up on that Tuesday. It is our Halloween celebration. We're going to have costume contest. We're going to have all kinds of other fun, exciting games going on, door prizes, and special food menu items. So come on in. It's no extra charge. Just got to be a member. It's going to be a good time. We're going to do it up. So come on into October Halloween Fest. All right, I don't have a special name for it. That's just what it is. October Halloween Fest. Okay, 31st. So mark your calendars. Next Tuesday. We're going to be open late as well. So if you can't get out of work and get down there during the day, that's perfectly fine. We'll be open, I believe, till 10 p.m. With special events and so on. So again, it's going to be a fun time. Get on down to the G on Halloween, okay? So after you're done trick-or-treating, and I think the curfew for kids this year is 8 o'clock, so you'll be long done with the children, get them tucked in for bed, and then you can come back to the club. We'll be ready to have you, and we'll be having a good time, all right? So, all right, I want to get into the show. Got some different items I want to talk to you guys about. There's been a lot of stuff going on in the news. We talked extensively last week about the monopolize attempt at our state level for the Michigan Marijuana Licensing Board. Certainly is alarming what we're seeing develop, and we're going to continue to watch it. So this week what I wanted to do is share with you further developments, some different stories that have been featured in papers around the state talking about this requirements, or these requirements I should say, for the Medical Marijuana Licensing Board for the new Michigan Medical Marijuana program. So lots of developments going on, and I guess before we get into any details, I want to make sure I mention that, you know, right now, currently across the state, you have communities, cities, townships doing their monthly meetings, and they are making decisions about medical marijuana in your community. Whether you're aware of it or not, it's happening. So I know that just this week I got to speak with Eric Gunnels, who's a trustee on the, I believe it's the Thetford Township Board, and they had a special meeting regarding these new rules and regulations just this past Monday. So there you go. I mean, it is happening all over the state. We've got communities who are simply opting out. They don't want anything to do with it. They just want to leave everything as is, remain status quo. We've got communities that are diving in head first. We've mentioned those on the program here before. And then we have some communities that are still trying to figure out what to do. There was an interesting article in the paper. I believe it was a community up in the Traverse City area. And while they were feeling pressure from some people to make a decision regarding their guidelines for the new medical marijuana licensing procedures, the board was also expressing that they wanted to have more clear information from the state. They wanted to see the rules finalized before they went through and started creating their own guidelines based around said rules. So personally, I think that's probably the wisest approach for these communities, is a wait-and-see approach. I know that a lot of folks want to be able to have their applications completed, ready to go, and ready to turn in on December 15th, which would require the said person, the said applicant, to have an ordinance already passed specifically for them in their community. So that's quite an ordeal to overtake. It's quite a feat to go into a community and say, hey, I want you to pass an ordinance for me. That's a pretty big deal. Some communities are responding, some are and moving forward, and others, like I said, are taking a wait-and-see approach. Some are just simply flat out saying no. So we're seeing a variance across Michigan, as we have continued to see since 2008. We've seen open, welcoming arms in some communities, and others completely shun out anything to do with medical marijuana at all. So I guess it's much more ado of the same thing over and over again. So this is kind of interesting. I want to get into a couple things at the state level that were shared, and I thought it was wonderful, really, the pouring of information that occurred in our news media outlets around the state. I mean, we had everything from your local papers to big papers like MLive and Detroit Free Press covering this story, and specifically talking about the fact that there is definitely a push from large corporations who want to take over the medical marijuana industry and want to create their own monopoly, if you will. So this has been well talked about, well covered at the state, around the state, by all media sources, and it's continuing to outpour. I'm hoping that the pressure that is created by this, that the outcry that has been, sort of raised up by this information, will have an effect on our licensing board at the state level. There seems to be a certain group on the board that is pro, if you will, I don't want to say pro-monopoly, but it kind of looks that way. There's other members on the board who seem to be, either way. They're kind of on the fence. And then we have some board members that have stepped up and said they are absolutely concerned about the patients. That's their number one concern, and they are also concerned that this is not a monopolized industry. So we've got sort of a mixed feelings coming around to us from the state level. I want to share with you what I've got so far. There's some pretty good stories here, and one of the ones, before we get into that, I thought this was pretty interesting. This is from Forbes.com, and it's a Gallup poll that was released, and it says 64% of adults in America now favor legalization for marijuana of some sort. That's up. I mean, when we started this program back in 2008, 2009, started talking about this, we already had a majority at that point. I believe at that point it was just over 50% of people in favor of legalized marijuana. This is now up to 64. So we've seen this just do nothing but grow. We've seen the public get more and more educated about marijuana, and understanding that the hype that was built from the propaganda put out by the government over the last 70 years, that a lot of it is just simply untrue. And this is being exposed. So consequently, more people are coming around and saying, look, I might not be a consumer myself, but I certainly don't have an issue with another person doing so. So that's good stuff. 64% is the highest level of support the organization Gallup poll meeting that they have ever seen in 48 years of polling on the topic. So that's pretty interesting. Also, another survey came out, and it showed support from the Republicans of 51%. So for the first time, Republicans supposedly are now endorsing and coming around and supporting legislation for marijuana reform, as opposed to the Democrats, who were also surveyed at the same time, and they had 67% support. So there's certainly a difference between the two, but now it seems like the whole majority of America is jumping on the bandwagon, and I think it's a good thing. Well, hopefully we'll see a change at the federal level because of it, and that's what we really need to have. As a comparison, Gallup asked the same question. This was featured in their article, and it said, their question was, do you think the use of marijuana should be made legal or not? This is what they've been asking since 1969. In that year, only 12% of Americans backed legalization. So, big difference from back in the beginning of the program when it was first made illegal in the 1970s till today. A little bit better educated, and here we are, plus 60%. That's pretty good, 64% of Americans. All right. Getting back into our state here, I know I jumped off there for a second here, but getting back into our state here and talking about the Medical Marijuana Licensing Board, talking about their regulations, and talking about the attempted monopolization of this whole thing. This was featured in MLive's paper. It was written by Emily Lawler. I don't know if I'm saying her last name correctly, but I apologize if I am not. But she's been doing a great job. I got to give props to this person, Emily Lawler. Been writing for MLive, and she has certainly been exposing this story behind the story, if you will. This is an article that she put out, just came out today. I'd encourage you to read it, share it with your friends, and so on. Again, it's on MLive. And I'm going to get into the meat and bones of it for you. I don't want to read the whole article, of course, but let me get into this for you. It says, since February, businesses through a cadre of lobbyists have been privately weighing in on potential rules for the new medical marijuana industry. State officials who are in charge of regulating have agreed to personal meetings with big players, gone out to lunch with lobbyists, and even given private presentations to lobbyist groups, according to records that were obtained by MLive and the Michigan Campaign Finance Network under the Freedom of Information Act. So the action stems from, obviously, the law that was set up in 2016, and it goes on from there. So this is the bones of it. The department asked lobbyists and others for input through a series of questionnaires, said the BMMR director Andrew Brisboe, as it gathered information and educated itself before crafting regulations. It says, we needed to rely on expertise and that it's individuals that are interested participants in the industry, their representation, and other state regulatory agencies. We have really tried to gather as much information from all those sources as possible. This is from, again, BMMR Director Andrew Brisboe. Before I get in any further in this article, I'd like you to go back through that little paragraph with me briefly. It says, we needed to rely on expertise, and that is individuals that are interested participants in their industry, their representation, and other state regulatory agencies. So my question to you, viewers of the G3C podcast, is, do interested participants, their representatives, and state regulatory agencies, are any of those experts on medical marijuana, experts on what patients need or what caregivers are going through to deliver that medicine to their patients? Are any of those qualified? I would have to rhetorically say no. I mean, if you're interested in something, well, that doesn't mean you're experienced in it. In fact, it quite means the opposite. It means that you are not experienced in it. You are interested in it. You're not yet doing it. So here we go. Moving on into the article. It says here, apologize. They are protecting the interest of cronies that weren't willing to take the risk that we were willing to take when we were willing to take them. This was a comment made by one of the attendees at the board meeting, a man named Mr. Hall. I think that's a good statement here. I think that's pretty telling. Let me get in. I'm trying to find this here. Okay, sorry, I'm waiting for my computer. All right, so here's the bones of it. Former House Speaker Rick Johnson has had a lot of connections in Lansing. And again, this is from Emily Lawler's article. Rick Johnson is also the head of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Licensing Board. Before that, he was a lobbyist for a lobbying firm that did have ties to some of the things that were lobbied for in this bill. And before that, he was the former House Speaker here in Michigan. So pretty well connected fella, Mr. Rick Johnson. Michigan defines lobbying as communicating directly with an official in the executive branch of state government or an official in the legislative branch of state government for the purpose of influencing legislative or administrative action. But only some officials, including elected office holders and highest ranking department personnel, are considered lobbyable. One company mentioned directly in emails that were dug up is Moxie, a company that processes and distributes marijuana in multiple states. Their lobbyist, Ron Corey, submitted their answers to one of the LARA questionnaires. Its representatives did not respond to a request for comment. In one email, a man named Curtis thanked Gary Owen, a lobbyist for one of the state's largest lobbying firms, Governmental Consulting Services, for lunch, and said it was good to meet with him and someone whose name was redacted to talk about the new medical marijuana licensing law and the department's progress. In other emails, Owen asked state regulators, including Brisboe, to attend summits on medical marijuana in the firm's conference room. Owen specifically said in one message, even some folks that may be seeking licensure would attend some of these events. Brisboe agreed to attend a July summit. Brisboe said the department's meetings weren't limited to lobbyists and their clients. They've spoken at different associations and made themselves available, he said. Recently, the Bureau formed work groups to do more information gathering. We've talked about that on the program. It says here, in at least a few instances, decisions at the legislative and administrative levels have benefited big businesses. Emails obtained by MLive show that Lentine was able to get language in the state budget that would allow the state to consider a closed-loop payment system. This is kind of a moot point because they're not going with a closed-loop system, but it does show you how lobbying works. The Department of Treasury doesn't plan to pursue the closed-loop payment system at this time, a spokesman said. Administratively, one of the questions the department circulated was whether people should be able to allow to operate more than one type of license. We've talked about this, and we know now that LARA has, in fact, agreed that you can operate more than one license, and in addition to that, you can stack your licenses. Let's see here. The law required the board to make sure applicants have the means to operate and maintain medical marijuana facilities, but left it up to regulators to determine what that meant. At the meeting, obviously, you know what that ended up turning out to be and what they have suggested so far. Obviously, the concern here is that those limits are going to snuff out smaller businesses. Want to get into, let me see if I can find this here. This a little bit more about the chair, Rick Johnson. This is also by Emily Lawler as well. Rick Johnson was once a Speaker of the Michigan House, spent a decade as a registered lobbyist in Lansing. Now he's the chair of the Michigan Marijuana Licensing Board. Many people view Johnson as an ethical broker who will enforce application requirements with an even hand. Others are concerned that Johnson's deep connections to Lansing's business elite could impact his decisions. Johnson has repeatedly denied that he has any conflicts of interest, and an investigation found at least one of Johnson's former lobbying clients is considering pursuing a license from Johnson's led board. Johnson has also multiple other connections with those who could seek to influence the process. Obviously, Johnson was appointed by Rick Snyder. He issued out a disclosure form which would expose any potential conflicts of interest. However, he did not issue that form until, I believe it was September of this year, even though he was elected to the board back in May. Also, he did so post having 3 public meetings as the head of this board, and now he just has filed this disclosure. Less than a week after Johnson's appointment became official, a Texas businessman met with officials with LARA. According to a LARA spokesperson, that businessman, Robert Joe Tondu, owns an energy generation plant in Michigan and had previously paid Johnson to lobby on his behalf in Lansing. Johnson initially said he had no former clients who were looking to get licenses from the board he leads. Then when he was asked specifically about Tondu's interest, Johnson responded that he worked for Tondu on energy issues only and that he hadn't done any work for Tondu for more than a year. He also wasn't sure if Tondu was definitely getting into the marijuana business. His comments, "I do not see any conflict with anyone," Johnson continued. "Here's why. We as a board, we really don't have a hell of a lot of control over it. If they fill out the application, pay the fees, follow every letter of the application, we say yes. If they don't, we can say no." In an interview, Tondu said he is unsure whether he will apply for a license, invest in another applicant's business, or decide against pursuing an investment in Michigan altogether. Tondu said he had never discussed medical marijuana plans with Johnson. However, he did say he congratulated Johnson on his appointment to the board. At this point, Tondu's interest in medical marijuana is the clearest connection between Johnson appears to have a potential applicant for a license. So, I mean, obviously, if the guy who was working at a lobbyist agency for the past 10 years, and now he's appointed to be the leader of a government-appointed board. Even our own Senator Rick Jones said that he thought that that was preposterous, that he was very shocked that this individual was chosen and selected to be head of this board, certainly considering where he came from. And once again, here I am applauding Senator Rick Jones. He's stepped up again, and he's calling it out. It says, Jones, who chairs the Senate committee that worked on the medical marijuana law, said he didn't understand why Johnson had been appointed at all before that disclosure was filed. Jones says his understanding was that the disclosure was part of the rules for the appointments. So here this gentleman was appointed to it, not even following the rules of what he was supposed to be appointed for. It certainly brings up some red flags. Is he the right person to be sitting in that chair? Probably not. Considering his past connections, considering he came from a lobbyist firm. I know he has obvious experience being a former House Speaker, but doesn't necessarily make him qualified to lead up a medical marijuana licensing board. And what we've seen come from the board certainly makes this all that much more suspect. So very, very interesting here. We've talked about some of the other board members as well, such as like Sergeant Bailey and his antagonistic approach with law enforcement towards medical marijuana, and a few of the other members as well. But I think this goes on to highlight some of the issues that we're dealing with here. I guess I know a lot of folks are concerned about, what is going to happen and so on and so forth. I know that when December 15th comes, there's not going to be any change to the patient or the caregiver law. And I think that's the most important thing, that those of us that are already in the program right now, those of us that are patients that are depending on medication to be there, you can still depend on that, and it's still going to be there. These new licensed facilities are not going to come online December 15th by any means. It's going to be quite a ways while so on afterwards, probably leading up to maybe 12 months after they've submitted their application before they're actually up and running and providing medications. So for the majority of us out there that are currently in the program right now, these facilities are not even going to be on the map for quite some time, and I know that it's all that's pretty much being talked about right now at this point. But I think that it's mostly hype. It's what's being in the media and so on. What we need to focus on is what we've always focused on, and that's our patients. So very interesting. I'm very pleased that the backstory here is being exposed on a mainstream level, so that our board can be under a microscope, if you will, so that their actions can be discussed openly in public. And I think that that's one of the best ways for us to continue to hold them accountable. Kudos to MLive for featuring these articles. Kudos to Emily Lawler, who wrote these articles and has helped bringing this information to light. If it may not have a direct impact, I don't think we're going to see like any board members resign or anything like that. But it certainly puts them, like I said, under the microscope, and hopefully will hold them to a higher standard in ensuring that this is a fair and complete process for everyone involved and not just a select few. So that's what I have for the state. That's what I wanted to share with you. Not a lot's changed, obviously, since next week. There are workshops that I mentioned that Lara is putting on in regards to the new application process. They are featured on Lara's website. You can go there and check them out for yourself. They are still taking people to sign up for these. They are free, I do believe. And I was told that even the Southeastern class, which is being held in Oakland County, had so many people sign up that they had to move the venue from the local university to another venue that would hold more people. They've had over 2,000 people sign up for these classes, and probably will have even more so continue to do so. But you can do so yourself if you just want to get some general information, and whatever information will be at those classes we'll be sharing with you here on the podcast as well, so you guys won't miss anything whether you go or not. Okay. But let's move on to some other news here. There was some other things happening around the world, not just in Michigan, and so let's share those with you. Okay. One of the things I saw in here was St. Louis, the city of St. Louis in Missouri, the one with the arch. Looks like they're trying to get medical marijuana for their city, even though Missouri is poorly lacking behind. So it was an interesting development there. And let's see, what else can I find for you? Oh, big news in Canada. not necessarily that recent, but Canada's fight is very similar to what's going on here that you see happening in Michigan. There's a battle between the monopolies and then small businesses, if you will. And this is going on right now. It's going on to the exact same thing. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes. Another interesting story, Washington tops 1.1 billion in cannabis sales at their 9-month mark. So Washington, if you remember, is one of the states that legalized cannabis for adult use. They already had medical marijuana there for quite some time, and boom, now here we go. Already over $1 billion in sales at just 9 months. Another big mark that was reached was Nevada's sales. Nevada also recently just opened up their legalized market there. Their sales for the August for the state, $33 million. So pretty big numbers. And you know, you could probably bet that Nevada will become a leader in the industry when it comes to this. A lot of tourism and so on. So pretty amazing when you look at the industry that's going on. Obviously, there's a lot of folks that want to get in and see this as a green rush, just like we've seen for stock bubbles. When it comes to whether it be the internet bubble or the housing bubble or whatever. And this is kind of the same thing. It's on the cusp. It's on the beginning. And people are getting excited. I think the important thing is that we keep the patients first, and then we make it fair for everybody. So there you go. That's what I want to share with you this week. Not a ton of information, but it is important. And I know a lot of folks wanted updates on what's going on at the state. That's pretty much what's going on at the state. Their next meeting is coming up here in November. Whatever comes from that meeting, of course, we'll share with you here on the program. And we'll keep you guys in tune. Best thing you can do is stay informed and stay connected. All right. John, thanks for being with me in the studio today. I definitely appreciate it. You guys get out there, clean up the leaves, stay healthy, stay warm. All right. We'll catch you next week here on the Genesee County Compassion Club show. Thank you.